Well, let me begin by thanking the sponsoring organizations for this conference, for what you continue to do for our veterans and for our country, and the contributions that you continue to make, I believe, at a particularly important time in our world and in our country. Also, I want to offer my congratulations to the honorees here who will be given different recognitions, but regardless of the individual recognition, those recognitions are about service to one's country and serving a higher purpose in life. To all of you, thank you. To all our veterans, thank you for your service. And to those who are here this morning who are currently preparing themselves for their future, but your future is directly connected to the future of our country and the world. So I'm grateful for an opportunity to say hello this morning and offer a couple of thoughts, and then open it up to questions, comments, insults, whatever you would like to offer. First, I know that you have occasionally noticed that we have an election this year, and mercifully, it's about ready to end. It has not particularly enhanced our democracy and our country, and as the world views America, and I think unquestionably since World War II, the world has seen America as, if nothing else, a stable force in the world. People can disagree with us. We surely make mistakes. We have made mistakes. We'll make more. But we are the one country that has used its power as judiciously and carefully as any power, great power, in history. We've overextended our reach. We've abused our power at times. We've gotten ourselves in trouble at times. But overall, our record is pretty good. And I think that tends to get lost in the larger context of the kind of world that we're in today, because we're in this world of immediacy. Everything is coming at us at an unprecedented rate. It's this breathless breaking news every moment, every moment. And we have, but more to the point, we take very little time to really reflect on who we are, the bigger issues. And that includes history. And I think history has I believe, been shown clearly over the centuries, a good teacher. Challenges are different, times are different, eras are different, but there are some frames of reference and reference points in history that are good guideposts. And those of you who know something about using a compass, and when I was in the military, we didn't depend on computers. We didn't have them. We used compasses. When you were in a jungle on a patrol, you had no idea where you were. You relied on that compass because before you set out on an ambush patrol or reconnaissance patrol, any kind of a patrol, you would shoot an azimuth, and you would stay true to that azimuth. And in the world that we find ourselves today, it's more and more difficult to stay true to an azimuth because of the complications. We have 7 billion global citizens today, living, all of us, in a global community underpinned by a global economy. Demographers tell us we'll put 2 billion more people on the face of the earth by 2050, probably before. That's in itself, that demographic figure is astounding, because what that's going to continue to require is more of the essentials of life: clean water, air, food, jobs, and probably underpinning it all is hope. And when a man is without hope, there's very little left. And when desperate people are in desperate situations, they do desperate things. And that is just but one element of the kind of world that we're living in today. And we see it, of course, in the Middle East, but we see it in other countries as well. Our young people here today who are preparing themselves, and you never end that preparation process. You continue it throughout your career and your life, no matter how old you are. You are dealing with and going to be dealing with a set of dynamics that we've never seen before. And so we all, I think almost everyone in this room probably was born during World War II or after World War II. I was born at the front end of the baby boomer generation. My father was in South Pacific for 2.5 years, came back, and I was born in 1946. The 330 million Americans today fit that category post-World War II, almost all of them. And our world has been a world where America has dominated, has unquestionably been the great power of our time. The world is now shifting in different ways. That doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad. But in a way, it is exactly what our founding fathers and mothers who built the post-World War II world order, actually intended. Build a world order based on common interests, not on differences, building coalitions of common interest, the United Nations, NATO, collective security, IMF, World Bank, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, dozens of multilateral, multinational development banks, all about working together where we could agree. Foundational platform planks for that order were strong alliances, and still are, maybe more important than ever, and trade. There were other dimensions to that. But if we could find enough common interests with each other, regardless of our differences, then we would build some platform of understanding to move us to the next stage of trying to resolve differences. That's worked pretty well. Now we are in a different kind of a world in many ways that as I said, it's worked in many ways. Diffusion of economic power. We've never seen such diffusion of economic power in other nations. More possibilities. The advancement of mankind in every discipline. More republics, liberties, respect for individual freedom. Technology has driven it in a way that no one could have anticipated. It has accelerated the rate of expectations of people all over the world, because all you need to do is you can see it real time on your phone or other mediums that transmit real-time photographs and activities. So the world is now integrating in a way that make it more complicated. I think in many ways that's good. It presents a new management challenge for all of us. And so the post-World War II order, that I believe, has held pretty well. No World War III. We kind of accept that today, that would be crazy. But after World War II, it was a concern that every one of the leaders in the world had. No nuclear exchange. That was a real concern. And we kind of accept that as just, well, of course we're not going to have a nuclear war. If nothing else, that post-World War II order was able to avert both of those so far. So we're having to adjust now in a way that America's not ever had to adjust. We're having to adapt with a certain agility that we've never had to deal with, not in our lifetimes, because we have been so dominant that we've essentially dictated terms in all areas. That doesn't mean that certainly that America is weaker, not at all. America is still clearly the great power of our time. You can take any metric and apply any measure you want to that, economic power, military power, take it across the board in every institution of a society. There's no one who is close to the United States. Doesn't mean it'll always be that way. That's really up to every generation. It'll be much up to the decisions. Much of this generation, current generation, and beyond represented here, it'll be really dependent on your decisions. So I emphasize this point because you're dealing, many of you, with a set of dynamics now that we've really never had to deal with. And I think it's important to reflect on that for a bit because we have been so inundated with the nonsense of this election that clearly our country is better than this election. Our people expect more. I think we have degraded our democracy in many ways during this process. But we're too good to become captive to that, and we will come back out of this process, and we'll have learned from this process. And it is as much a reason for hope for the fact that we self-correct in this country in a way that no other country has. In many ways, like no other country can. When you look at the fact, first of all, we're a nation of laws, we have a working constitution, we can adapt and adjust without guillotining each other. We have a working, breathing, living constitution that can change the inequities in our society. The reason we have 27 amendments to the Constitution, we didn't get it all right the first time. In fact, 100 years ago, half the people in this room could not vote in the United States of America. When this country was founded, unless you were a white male landowner, you didn't have all the rights enshrined in the Constitution. So the point is, we can self-correct. We have that ability. And we have a fabric of society that's integrated like no other country. It was the beginning of our country. We've integrated our religions, our ethnicity, our backgrounds, our philosophies in a way that makes it work. It doesn't mean we're better than anybody. It doesn't mean we're smarter than anybody. But we should not overlook that tremendous capacity. Last point I'd make on this. With all the problems, and we all are getting a heavy dose of the inventory every day of every problem America has, and the vilification of everybody who leads. We still, the world, the United States, have more capacity and more capability to change and to make the world better than any generation in the history of man. With all the problems, with all the issues, with all the challenges, we have more capacity, we have more capability. And that really is up to us, whether we are wise enough to use that. Certainly military, the military force of a nation, the security enterprise of a nation is part of that, but it cannot lead that. You cannot lead your policy, your foreign policy, economic policy, any part of a policy of your country with your military. You cannot shock and awe countries into liberalism and to human rights. It doesn't work that way. We've learned some tough lessons the last few years on this. It has to be incorporated into the larger frame of your diplomatic policy, of your political strategy, and how you want to change or how you want to affect a policy. But the military is an enforcement part of that, as our other enforcement mechanisms and powers a great nation has, like our economy, economic sanctions. But we can't lead with the military. And I think over the years, our military has been put in situations where it has been expected to do things it can't do. It can't do all the things that we've asked the military to do. The military can't be the development institution in a country. It can't be the political institution in the country. It can't be the police institution in the country. It can't be the warrior military enforcement institution in every country. The military does things better than anybody, and we have more capability, essentially because we have more capacity than certainly any department. But we're going to have to be a little wiser, it seems to me, in how we use our military, and for what purpose. The other part of that is just one example, and then we'll go to whatever you want to talk about. One of the things I did when I was Secretary of Defense is I was the first secretary to invite all of the ASEAN defense ministers to the United States. The 10 ASEAN defense ministers representing the 10 ASEAN nations and their spouses came to Hawaii for a 3-day conference. And I took those 3 days not to dwell on only military and defense issues, but I broadened it. And we took half of those 3 days to deal with the same concerns that these ASEAN nations have, that all nations have with their societies, with their economies, health issues, clean water, clean air, infrastructure, education, social issues. And so I had the director of the USAID there in Hawaii. I had Secretary of Commerce. I had our senior NOAA, our weather people there. I had senior members from the Department of Agriculture there. And the point being, I used the terminology before of common interests. I mean, what is a more common interest that unifies people than the basics of the needs of human beings? We all are human beings, no matter where you're from, what your religion is, what your color is, what branch of service you're from. We all require certain things. And I think there is a common denominator to, at least I've found it as I've traveled over the years to, I don't know, well over 100 countries, that, for example, I've never found any group of people, regardless of religion, tribe, ethnicity, country, that loves their family more than any other group. And these are basic common denominators of people to people. So we started working on some of those issues and sharing our thinking in ways the United States could help with these ASEAN nations. Then we worked for a day and a half on military and security issues because they were interested. It's what our job was. But it had to be more than just asking them to do more with us on rotational exercises, focusing on security and military matters. It had to be bigger than that. And I think in the world, especially today, but more importantly, the world our young people here are going to inherit, that's going to be critically important as you factor in your leadership and your thinking as you take commands of our larger commands worldwide. But this is all to say, in summary, what you're doing here and this weekend, this conference, as you honor people who have served before, who are role models, and it is important we have role models. It is important we have mentors, that we not forget the tremendous amount of common courage and also the unusual courage that we find in our society. And much of it is manifested in the military for obvious reasons, but there's a lot of courage in society everywhere. And I think, again, we should emphasize that this conference does that, recognize it. Also, it integrates and brings together so many great speakers that you have, and the integration of thinking and ideas and recognition and elevating not just the discourse, but the possibilities. Because if nothing else is true about the United States of America, it is a country that is always believed in new possibilities, new hope. We can make the world better. And again, we've had our share of mistakes and made those mistakes. We're imperfect, we're flawed like all humans. But again, when you step back and you frame this up and you review a good part, certainly of the last 1,000 years, but you can go back to the Roman Empire or the Ottoman Empire, or some of the great empires. No nation has ever used its power as judiciously and benevolently as the United States has. So, for all the reasons that you're here this weekend, and all of you who are taking the time to pay attention to this, I again thank you and salute you for your service and continued service to our country. I'd be glad to respond to any questions or anything you want to talk about.
Mr. Secretary, Cadet Thomas from the United States Military Academy. That's loud. So I was recently reading an article where you said for the next presidential candidate, the one key trait that you would say that they need to do is listen. Can you please frame some context behind that as to why you believe that it's the most essential leadership trait that we should embody?
Well, I did say that, and I have often said that. I violate that principle often. But to your question, the main reason that's number one is because if you don't listen, you don't learn anything. And in leadership, one of the critical dimensions of leadership, as you all know, is you listen to your team. You listen to the people around you. You listen to everyone, so everyone knows they have input into a process, into decision-making. Now, the military, I don't have to tell you all, is very structured, very disciplined. The commander gives the order, yes, sir. And I'm not suggesting that we have a debate over the commander's orders or any order anybody gets. That's not what I'm talking about. Leadership is not just giving commands. Leadership is listening and learning. And from all that, you become a better leader. Your people will have more confidence in you. They will respond to you more effectively. And in this kind of a world, that is absolutely critical, because there are so many dimensions and complications to everything. And the world is so now, in personal relationships, everything, so completely interconnected. No decision can be made in any context, in any way, without having consequences to and ripple effects to a number of other areas. It just doesn't work that way. So listening is the only way I know that you can help educate yourself, understand your people, the people around you, and last point on this, it's the only way you build a team. Nobody is smart enough to do it alone. It doesn't work that way. No one is that good. At least I've never met one, but maybe there's somebody out. Maybe one of you do it alone. But you just better accept that right now. You're not near as smart as you might think you are. And if you understand that and accept that, then you're going to do fine. It's the people who think they're smarter than everybody who get themselves in trouble. And you're finally found out as the emperor has no clothes. And that's not a particularly good place to be, especially on a winter day. But, yes?
Secretary, I normally don't participate in the Q&A session, but I've got a question that's really bothered me for a long time, and that's the fact that of the 2 million plus Americans who served in Iraq, not one single living veteran has received the Medal of Honor. Not the case for Afghanistan, where 11 living recipients. We have one we're honoring tonight. This just seems to be something I can't understand, number one, but I know you impaneled a committee, I believe, to look into this question, and I'm just wondering whatever happened to that. Were there many conclusions reached?
There were so many things that would come across my desk, or secretary of one of the services or one of the chiefs would talk about awards and honors and different ideas for different medals and new medals. And so one day I was talking to the chiefs, and I met with the chiefs at least once a week, and often would meet alone with them, each one of them one-on-one, but always met with them once a week, sometimes twice a week. And I said to him, when is the last time we, as a force, a complete force, have reviewed our decorations and our honors and medals? And no one was quite sure. I said, and actually what precipitated part of this was a similar question that I had gotten regarding Iraq, veterans of Iraq. And I said, I know there's always an issue on decorations and who gets them and medals, and did they really deserve a Medal of Honor, should have been a Silver Star, or a Silver Star should have been a Medal of Honor, and I get all that. But I said, I'm concerned that we're drifting and have been drifting, and we're not relevant as much as we should be on recognition, on awards, decorations, medals. And I'm a believer that recognition is important. And I saw too many violations of that in Vietnam, for example. I saw too many people getting medals when they should never have gotten medals. I saw a lot of uncommon courage that was never recognized because they didn't promote themselves, and I saw a lot of that. If you came back and you in the base camp and you promoted yourself and went to a couple of guys and said, well, you saw what I did, and so on and so on, and a couple of guys, all they want to do is go drink a beer, and yeah, I'll sign whatever. I saw too much of that, and I saw too much of the person who did something really incredible, and he didn't care. I mean, he just wanted to get through Vietnam, get home, and he didn't care if he had a medal or not. And it just was unfair. So I have come at this from going back to my time in Vietnam in 1968. But I did impanel a commission, and I left before the final report was written. And I read the other day that that report was written, and I think it's now, somebody here in the audience may be aware of it, but the final recommendations have been made. I think it's complete. It needed to be updated, and I think, like always, these important institutional pieces of our military need to be reviewed every now and then. If for no other reason, are they relevant? Are they really recognizing the people that should be recognized? And are we making it commensurate to the bravery and the valor? And also, are we policing this enough too? Because I think it's very unfair, and I think you degrade any, especially medal for valor, if it's kind of given out way too liberally. I mean, I think decorations, especially for valor, should really be held to a pretty high standard. So I think that report is out. I haven't seen it, but I think it's out. Okay. Okay, go to you, and then if there's anybody over here, I'll go to this side over here. We've got somebody over there? Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll take you, and then we'll go to you next after, yeah.
Sir, West Point, you mentioned earlier in your speech that the military shouldn't be used as a developing and a policing force. This kind of directly conflicts with policy of the last 15 years. How do you think that policy and strategy should be refined in terms of American engagement in the Middle East?
Yeah. Well, I have some just pretty simple questions. I served on the Foreign Relations Committee and the Intelligence Committee for 12 years, and during that whole process, and I used to ask about Iraq or Afghanistan, any of those places. I think we better always ask a set of, in my opinion, relevant and important questions before we push a button on any military invasion and incursion and use. First, what happens next? Okay, so you replace Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, Taliban. Then what happens? Who governs? Who determines who governs? What legitimacy is in place? How is the country rebuilt? Who's going to rebuild the country? What institutions there are capable of governing? There are probably a follow-on dozen questions that should be answered. Now, you can't answer all of them perfectly, I get that. But you've got to have some, it seems to me, some pretty solid answers before you send your military in. There's never, at least in my mind, a question that when you overload the zone with superior American military power, there's no one who can withstand that. I mean, Saddam Hussein was a joke. For 10 years, we had controlled 30% of his north through our overflights and 30% of his south. He couldn't even sell his own oil. His oil had to be sold to the United Nations, and percentages of those revenues were given to Kuwait for war reparations. I mean, he was withering on the vine. He wasn't essentially a threat to anybody. Brutal dictator, no good son of a bitch, yes, yes, yes. We got a lot of those around the world. And I'm not sure America wants to start invading all of them. But we didn't ask those kind of questions, and so that's what I'm talking about. That before you send your military in, you better have a pretty clear understanding of, after Saddam is gone, and he'll be gone, and they can't stand up to us. That's not the question. The bigger question comes after that. And here we are, again, back. Afghanistan, we're going into our 16th year. Taliban control more territory in Afghanistan today than they have in 15 years. Iraq's a mess. It's not because of us, but there are a lot of questions that I think didn't get asked first before we made some of those decisions. Yes?
Cadet Singh, University of Virginia. So how has your prior service experience influenced the decisions you've made as Secretary of Defense? And was there a specific instance in which you drew upon your prior knowledge in order to make a difficult decision?
Well, we're all products of our experiences. We're products of our environment. We're products of where we come from, what we see, products of our own mistakes. And so any experience any of us have in our lives, I think you do carry forward, and I hope we learn from those, and you apply those experiences to whatever job you have. In my case, as I became Secretary of Defense, there wasn't a day that went by that I didn't think about something about my experience in the Army in Vietnam. I mean, it's just in your fiber, and it helped me. If for no other reason, it helped me understand the military. I'm not an expert on anything, but I had worn the uniform. I had been a private. I had gone through basic. I had gone through combat. I worked and fought with people. I saw the military close hand. I was part of it. So that helped me understand That doesn't mean gave me any particular great answers to anything, but it helped me. But I also used that experience when I was in the Senate, always, because everything you do in your life, you can learn from it. There's nothing that any of us do every day that you don't draw some lesson from it. It may be so subconscious that you don't even realize it, but at some point in your life, in your career, whatever you're doing, you will draw back on that. You will draw back. So, yes, it was a big help to me. I don't think Secretaries of Defense necessarily always have to have had military experience or combat experience. I mean, I don't think that's a requisite, but I think it's helpful. If for no other reason than you have some feeling about the military, you appreciate firsthand the sacrifices what these men and women endure and their families. And I know intellectually, cerebrally, people say, oh, is it great, and is the military the only highly regarded, trusted, respected institution in this country? Every year when the Gallup poll is taken on the institutions, the military is up close to 80%, everybody is down in the basement. And it gets worse for everybody except the military. So there's no question intellectually that people appreciate the military and what they do. But when you're leading and when you're in these civilian jobs in the Department of Defense or Department of State, I think it does help to have had an experience in the military to really get a better understanding of it. But it doesn't mean that I was any better or any worse for it, but it helped me.
So you just touched on it, and I kind of wanted to go a little bit deeper into that. You know, here you have over 50% uniforms here that are about to serve, and teamwork is vital. Over the last decade, we've seen on the civilian side two sides on an aisle getting more and more unwilling to work together. And I'm not asking for, will it get better with what happens on Tuesday? But do you see, and then we see these gentlemen and these women up here that have done amazing things. And it's almost disappointing and frustrating to see then on the civilian side the lack of teamwork, the lack of cohesion, the leadership that these men and women have done and sacrificed. And then, we struggle to see what we see on TV these days. Mm-hmm. Do you see a path forward? Do you see a bright light at the end of the tunnel? Not on Tuesday, that could be the answer, but in the future, do you see both sides realizing that more leadership is necessary in order to effectively govern, to honor those people that I've mentioned?
Good question, and I do. I know maybe I'm accused of being too hopeful all the time, but I found in my life that it's just a hell of a lot easier to get up in the morning and be hopeful rather than living through a Greek tragedy every day. It just works better but I'm pretty damn clear-eyed too about issues in the world and life. So to your question, I do think it'll get better. Here's really what's happened. When I got to the Senate 20 years ago, the issue of national security and defense was never held captive to any political arguments. This was not ever used that I recall, by the Democrats or Republicans as a wedge issue or cutting edge issue. Republicans generally over the years since World War II have probably been known as the party that's more pro-military than the Democrats, but that doesn't separate and hasn't separated the two parties up until recently on using defense as a political weapon. Because it was always clearly understood that our security, American security, was the #1 issue. It's the highest order of government. the security of your country. There is no more important responsibility for the leader of a nation or country than the nation's security. That is number one above everything. And so there was a common purpose that our leaders had. And I tell you what I saw happen in that time. I saw as the World War II generation, members of Congress, started to leave the scene. That purpose, national purpose, governing, working together, but in particular, you keep the military and security out of politics. I saw that eroding, and I saw individuals coming into office to replace World War II veterans who didn't have that same sense of purpose and balance. And I think, consequently, we've seen, whether it's through sequestration or some of these other completely dangerous, irresponsible, mindless abdications of power by the Congress, holding captive, hostage, the Pentagon, DOD. And it's on both sides, by the way. It isn't just one party, it's both sides. I think that will change. The concern I have with all that, and I do have a big concern, and I've said it, and when I was Secretary of Defense, I said it before committees and hearings, is it endangers the quality of our next generation of leaders, these young people here, because smart people always have a lot of options. Good people will always have a lot of options. And on the best day, it is not easy to make the military your career, and you all know that. What you have to give up, your family, so on and so on and so on. So I'm really concerned about the quality and the fabric of the continued tremendous quality of people we have. If this kind of an attitude and uncertainty continues in our Congress and our politics, what we've just been talking about, that's the real downside. And the uncertainty, I mentioned sequestration, the uncertainty of sequestration. I know I used to get from a lot of people, well, Mr. Secretary, I mean, can't the Pentagon get along on $650 billion a year? Well, Pentagon can get along on whatever, but that isn't the issue. What does the American public expect? What does the President and the Congress expect out of the military? Now, if you expect the military to do all the things the military has been doing, and even more, and you continue to cut almost $1 trillion out of the Pentagon over a 10-year period, $100 billion a year, that includes the budget deal from 2011 and sequestration, and you're asking the Pentagon to do more? How's that work? That doesn't add up. So this has got to get reversed. I think it will get reversed. I believe it will, because it's a reality that will force our leaders to come to some recognition and reality, and the American people will always force it. Will always force it. Now, I don't think, quite honestly, that come Tuesday, and then Wednesday morning, and then on the morning of January 20th, that's all going to change. I mean, that's not the way it works. I think this country's in for a tough next few years. I think the world's in for a tough next few years. And we're going through one of those periods in history where there's a dip, and we have to stay very steady and clear and firm, and we'll come out of it. But your question is a very important one and a big issue. And we cannot continually allow this issue of security in our military to be caught in the web of cheap politics. It just won't work. It can't work. And the American people, if they don't know all the pieces and the facts, the American people have a great ability to intuitively sort things out. You can fool the public for a while. I mean, the great Lincoln quote, you can fool the American public for a while, but the American public will eventually get it. The intuition of the American public is so good and so right on that I talked about self-correction. We will get back on an azimuth, and I think in this case we will as well. Okay, yes.
Benjamin Frankie from Penn State University, sir.
Are you ROTC or what are you?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
RGC, sir.
Pretty good football team this year.
Yes, sir. Really happy about it. Sir, earlier you were talking about how we need to use the military. We need to make wiser decisions with it. And earlier you were also talking about you need to ask yourselves the hard questions before you go in anywhere. You need to look at what's going to come after, sir. Utilizing that kind of practice before we utilize the military or any of our other assets, sir, where do you think that'll take the military in the next couple years, sir? And how do you foresee the military going on from the past, from being mired in Afghanistan for the past 16 years, sir? Where do you see the military and all the other defense assets going, sir?
Well, a couple of answers to the question. Number one, as you all know, the Secretary of Defense, the military, doesn't set any policy. We respond to whatever policy the President of the United States sets and the Congress of the United States. So we have our opportunity to give our opinion and our thoughts, but everything flows on foreign policy, military policy, everything flows out of the White House. And so everything resides in the White House. And that's part of the answer to your question. Depends on the next president, depends on where the next president wants to go, his or her foreign policy, use of the military. And that's the way it works. I think that's the way it should work. President's accountable. Everybody is accountable. Second part of the question, we are in the military today, in particular the Air Force and the Navy, we are running platforms and assets that should have been retired 10 years ago. And the bill on this is coming due, and it's going to be a big bill. As Ohio-class submarines are now costing in the range of probably $10 billion, and all the other new platforms that we're going to have to replace, and you just can't go anymore. We're chewing up a tremendous amount of resources on maintenance and keeping a lot of these old platforms up and running when we shouldn't, for two reasons. The Congress won't let us get rid of a lot of them because of the members' own political parochial interests, because we're certain states, for example, the A-10, great plane for 40 years, but we got new planes coming in behind it. Mark Welch, former Chief of Staff of the Air Force, was an A-10 pilot. Damn near begged the Congress to let him start phasing out the A-10s because the maintenance costs of these old platforms was just eating up everything, and we were not being able to take enough of those resources and start plugging them into the back end to bringing these new platforms forward to replace the A-10. That's just one example of what's happening here. So we're going to one of these days be confronted, and it's coming soon. Ships are another example, where we're going to have to be facing the reality of replacing a lot of these platforms. And they're more expensive. And there are other political dimensions, and the Congress, I hold directly responsible for this. Give you another example. On the resource side, BRAC, the base relocation, closing. The Congress passed that law many, many years ago to essentially insulate Congress from the tough decisions. And I get it. You know, I was on that side of the table once. I mean, no member of Congress or the Senate wants to see his or her base closed in their state or their district. So I get that. And that's why the Congress went to this kind of insulated way to do it, an independent commission going around independently, honestly evaluating every facility we have, coming back and saying, okay, this is the inventory of, we think, the overhead the Pentagon doesn't want, by the way, doesn't need, ought to be closed. No business would have a question about that. We're right now carrying the Pentagon probably close to 25% or more overhead we don't need. And the Congress won't even allow us, and every budget I presented was asking for that authority for the Congress to impanel a new BRAC commission. They won't even hold a hearing on it. They won't give it even a further conversation. So when you've got that kind of Congress stopping the decision-making inside the Pentagon from the people who actually know it and understand it better than anybody on Capitol Hill, you're going to have a problem. And a lot of our problem today is because of that. And so one of the answers I always was quite amused at from these members was, well, why don't you close down facilities you don't need around the world first? Well, we've closed everything around the world we can possibly close, plus the fact is you want forward positions always, because it serves your interest for the obvious reasons. Now, not that you permanently station troops there. Now, we still have, obviously, Okinawa, South Korea, are a couple of examples. But rotational opportunities. When I was a secretary, I signed the new agreements with the Philippines, now with the new president. Philippines, we'll see. But to allow the United States to use Subic and Clark again for rotational purposes. Well, that was a big deal. We've got, I signed a deal with the Australians for the first time to have the Marines in there on a rotational basis in northern Australia. That's the smarter way to do this, but you still need facilities. Now you're not moving families and infrastructure like we have in Okinawa or South Korea, or certainly during post-Cold War in Germany, when we had huge, many of you probably served there, 250, 300,000 troops there, plus their families. But you've got to have those forward bases, absolutely. So the Congress is going to have to, they're going to have to start allowing the Pentagon and the professionals, allow them to manage and do their job. I agree on oversight. I strongly agree on oversight by the Congress. But it's like any business or any management. If you're going to hire or you're going to appoint a manager or a director, you let them do their job. If you're going to be overriding them all the time and every hour, it's no, you can't. Well, why do you need them? Why don't you? Because you're so smart and so good, you just make all the decisions. Now, if they're not doing their job, then get someone else. But that's another part of your question. All right, thank you very much, and have a good time this week. Thank you. Jim, thank you.